Thank you, members. Good evening, members, officers, members of the public. Can I welcome you to this Planning Committee meeting on Wednesday, the 14th of December. As usual, I have to go through housekeeping for those who haven't been along to sit with us before. If the fire alarm is activated, can you please vacate the offices via the stairs, which are opposite the lifts, and also you can use the door to my right, which will lead you downstairs. Assemble on Holy Square Green, and if it's safe to do so, the officers will bring you back over here so we can continue the meeting. Does anybody attend filming this meeting this evening? No, thank you. I will remind members and the public that we are being live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Restriction of mobile phones. Would everybody present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make and receive phone calls in the chamber whilst this meeting is in progress. Members requesting to speak under Council Procedure 20.1. I have one here at the moment, which is Councillor Bailey, and I believe the item is 4L. Councillor Bailey, York Street.
Pardon?
Councillor 4L.
Yes,
York
yes,
Street.
please.
York Street.
Sorry.
Is it?
York Street. Yes.
York
York
Street.
Street.
Yes. Sorry, Councillor Bailey.
I hear what you're saying.
It's the voice again, as usual. Thank you. Are there any other members who aren't on the committee who wish to speak tonight? I can't see any. Thank you. Public speaking. I have public speaking on agenda items 4A, All Saints Industrial Estate in Margate. Items 4B, land south of Millennium Way, Broadstairs. Item 4C, St Mary's Avenue, Margate. Item 4D, 31 Southwood Road, Ramsgate. Item 4, The Outlook, Foxborough Lane, Minster. And item 4L, 4 York Street, Broadstairs. Would members please note. Agenda item 1, I have apologies and received from Councillor Shrub. Councillor Wallins is substitute. I also have apologies from Councillor Everett. I'm not sure whether Councillor Everett has a... Thank you, Councillor Orban. Are there any other apologies? No, I can't see any. Thank you. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Thank you, Councillor Wing.
Yes, Chair. Item 4E, which is 53 Addington Street, my revised planning application.
Thank you. That is noted. Thank you very much. Agenda item 3. Do members agree that the minutes of the Planning Committee meeting held on the 16th of November 2022 be approved as a correct record? Could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Orban, seconder. Councillor Coleman-Cook. Do members agree? Thank you, members. Agenda item 4, schedule of planning applications. Any site visits, members, and it will be warmer in January, will take place on, so they tell me, will be on the 6th of January, which is a Friday in 2023. Just going to hand over to Mr. Livingston, our planning applications manager, for a point of information.
Thank you, Chair. Point of information for members on schedule item 4E, 53 Addington Street, Ramsgate. The report contains a summary of a representation received, which includes defamatory accusations towards the applicant. This representation was not published online, however, the comments were included in the committee report in error. On behalf of the Planning Department, I wish to sincerely apologise to the applicant, Councillor Wing, for this error, and these comments should be disregarded by members in determining the planning application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I spotted that, and apologies as well from myself as Chair. Agenda item 4A, All Saints Industrial Estate, All Saints Avenue in Margate. Speaking against this application is Mr. Hogman. Is Mr. Hogman here? Hodgman, beg your pardon, Mr. Hodgman. You have 3 minutes to make your comments, please.
Okay, good evening. The developer proposes to build 58 industrial units on the site, which is quite a big site and quite a lot of units. They've had they intend to build over a lot of the access roads on the estate, which will cause serious problems to the people already on the estate. There are a couple of firms already on the estate that use articulated lorries, and they state in their transport assessment that the biggest vehicle expected to arrive on the estate is a dust cart. If an articulated vehicle comes on the estate, once it's built, the only way it will be able to get off will be by reversing out the estate. There is no way it will turn round, because they intend to build these units on a lot of the roadways and the access ways. That is wrong, and that will cause problems. You cannot reverse an articulated vehicle back out onto the road. It's dangerous. The dust carts they're referring to, they're saying about 39 foot long. An articulated vehicle is 55 foot long with a gross vehicle weight of 44 tonnes. There's a company on the estate called Can Do Timber. They have regular deliveries made by these vehicles several times a week. If these vehicles can't turn around on the estate, they can at the moment, but once the buildings are put up, they will not be able to turn around. This is just unacceptable. It will be dangerous. No one's taken that into account with this application. That needs addressing. Also, if you look at the plans they've submitted for the new buildings, they've put a new roadway, I don't know if you've got the information in front of you, a new road going up the side of the existing old building, the old goods shed. And then they've got roads going off to the right where the new warehousing is, okay, which is fine. But as you drive down there towards the end, it just comes to a stop. There's just a brick wall at the end. There's no way of sort of, you can't turn out. It's a cul-de-sac. Now, even if you get a bin lorry going around there, and all these new units will have to have bins, you've got to get rid of the waste. It'll be commercial. It won't be the council. It'll be commercial waste contractor doing it. They'll have to go around and pick these bins up and empty the bins. When they come to the end of that little road, they'll have no way of turning around. They'll have to reverse back out onto the other road and do the same thing again. It's ridiculous. There's no room for large vehicles to turn around once they've gone down into where the new buildings are. That's just not acceptable. That will cause problems, and that should be addressed. And they say also in their report that they don't expect any large articulated 16.5 metre articulated vehicles to visit these new buildings when they're put up, these new warehouses. That's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense. These people are going to be renting these new units. They've got big roller shutter doors. They're renting them so they can get big things in the building, like pallets and stuff like that. These are going to come down on lorries. Some of them will be articulated vehicles. If you don't believe me, go over to Manston, to the new estate that's been built over there. They've got similar sized industrial units there, and they're having large vehicles in there every day. You know, to say actually on this statement that we don't expect any vehicle larger than a dust cart to visit the estate at any time is absolute nonsense. And this should not be allowed to go ahead. That's it.
Thank you very much. I've let you go over time there because our lovely antique roadshow, is it functioning now, Stephen?
Yeah, it should be working now, sorry.
Right. Which, keep an eye on the BBC bargain hunt.
I'll time it on my laptop as well.
Right. Thank you. I'll go and watch it. Thank you for that. Also speaking against this application is a Miss Gagan. I hope I pronounced that right.
Gagan.
Gagan, thank you.
No worries. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak at this evening's meeting. My name is Hannah Gagan and I live on Railway Terrace, the nearest residential street to this proposed development. This row of houses has been there for over 100 years and over time has been boxed in on all sides by privately owned land. Our only access is from a set of steps on All Saints Avenue next to the entrance to the industrial estate, leading to the rear of our houses. We don't have any bin collections and currently there would be no access for emergency vehicles in the event of a fire. Whilst I welcome sensible development of the wasteland beyond my front garden, I have concerns about this proposal and the impact it will have on me, my neighbours and the environment. I'm certainly not against any development of this land. I would much prefer for it to be in use in the current wasteland, which has resulted in fires and antisocial behaviour in recent years. But I would like the thoughts and the concerns of Railway Terrace residents to be taken into consideration before any major works may begin. Our main concern is emergency egress in the event of a fire. With only one way out, we feel dangerously trapped. If the development didn't provide any emergency exit from the front of our properties, we feel this would present a risk for the residents of the 13 houses. We've had visits from local fire officers over the years who agree that the current single exit route is insufficient and unsafe. When emergency gas works were required earlier this year, a metal fence had to be cut away to allow access for the workers, once again highlighting how trapped we are. Getting access via Tivoli Park Avenue is not possible, so our only option for another safe route to from our houses would be via the area covered in this application. If this development goes ahead, it would be vital for permanent access to the front of our property to be included, both for the safety and convenience of residents. The row of trees where our properties border the industrial estate are very important. They act as a shield to noise and light from the industrial estate, railway line and dreamland and beyond it. Any development must keep these in place. To fully support or oppose this application, I need to have a much clearer idea of the planned use of these new buildings and what they would be, included the proposed hours of operation. Many Railway Terrace residents have children or work from home. We have bedrooms and lounges facing the site. Any potential noise, pollution from industrial units would impact our quality of life heavily. The extra traffic that this development would attract, both during the construction and ongoing use of the site, would also have a large impact on local residents. It's an already busy area and dangerous corner for cars and pedestrians alike, with heavy goods vehicles regularly visiting the industrial units. Any extra traffic, not to mention the influx during the high tourism summer months, and the pollution that this extra traffic brings, would have an impact on people living in all nearby streets. If this application is granted, we would ask developers to be good neighbours and involve local residents in consultations going forward. We would welcome a conversation about the inclusion of parking spaces for Railway Terrace residents and enabling bin and recycling collections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now would ask the planning officer, which is Ian, to outline this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is an outline application for the erection of 58 light industrial units, which is use class EG, with parking. So it's an outline application, but the only matter that is reserved is landscaping, so sort of hard and soft surfaces across the development. So appearance, scale, access, and design is all for consideration. So the site is outlined in red. You can see, as mentioned, Railway Terrace is the sort of semicircle of properties, as mentioned, access via a staircase, which you can just see off where the mouse is here. You've then got properties on Tivoli Park Avenue, which runs down on one boundary of the site, and then you've got other collection of industrial units, which makes up the All Saints Industrial Estate. So the site is allocated under policy EO1 of the local plan, which supports light industrial uses where it would not harm the living conditions of residential properties in close proximity. So the principle of development is acceptable. However, it falls for members to consider the impact on matters such as character and appearance of the area, living conditions of residents, highways, environment, etc. So this is an aerial image of the site. So you can see that there is a large area of hard surfacing which is currently sort of undeveloped in terms of no structures on it at the moment. There are some various things that are on the site which we'll look at when we're looking at the images. So just to go in with a 3D view, so sort of an isometric view, you can see on the left-hand side of the image, again, top left-hand side of the image, you can see Railway Terrace, then Tivoli Park Avenue properties. You can see the bank of trees that's been mentioned, which we'll look at in a bit more detail when we're on ground level. And then you can see the goods sheds, old station shed that is on the site, adjacent to the red line, as well as some of the other businesses that are operating at the rear of the site, some of which have access which relates to this proposal, and others of which have access via the section of the land that's to the top of the image. Obviously, you can see the railway at the top there as well. So this is the existing access into the site. Some members may be familiar with this, and you can see on the right-hand side the trees that start to run around the site and the embankment, which is part of this site. So this is then looking back towards that access, so it's not quite it's not double width for vehicles at the moment. Then this is another 3D view, so this is a view that shows the access that we were just looking at the top right of the image, and you can see Railway Terrace is in front of us, if you can see the mouse going around here with those trees. So it's showing at the moment you've got a hoarding that's erected around this site which forms the application site, which we'll look at now. So going down then, so we're continuing through the access. We're just going to go around the corner here where you can see in the fog a car on the left hand side there, which is where the hoarding starts, but you can see the corner of property on Railway Terrace, so you can see the change in land level that occurs between this site and the properties on Railway Terrace. And then that's a view towards the back of that property, so that clad property was the one we saw in the mist a second ago, and you can see that again the change in level and the embankment and the start of the trees, and you can see on the left hand side the start of the hoarding. So then this is a view further back. You can see the start of the rest of the hoarding and back where the existing access into the industrial estate is. And then this is a further wider view showing that hoarding at the moment and that bank of trees in the background. So this is now within the site. So the hoarding you can see the back of is on the right hand side of the image, and that's the trees that run around that semicircle of Railway Terrace. And then going into a bit more detail, looking on the left-hand side of this image, there we go, you can see the other end of Railway Terrace. Railway Terrace has got two sets of properties, and this is the other end property there. So again, this is just to show the detail of the change in level and also that bank of trees that's present as well. So in looking at the properties on Tivoli Park Avenue, so this is another 3D image showing the site and the back of those properties there. So you can see, again, that bank of trees. So we're just going to go through some images looking at those. So starting on the right-hand side of this image here, so around where the mouse is on the right-hand side, looking again at that bank of trees, and you can just about make out the tops of some roofs of properties above those, the existing fence at the top of the bank. Then this is a view just looking back again. You can see Arlington in the background and that hoarding running along there. So you can see on the left-hand side those trees at the back of Tivoli Park Avenue. This is, again, a view round showing those trees at the moment. And you can see, obviously, the site is partially developed. So it's previously developed land with the hard surfacing that's there. Turning to the left from that image, you can see, again, the backs of those properties. So you can see the dorm window at roof level. And you can see that these windows are all at first floor level on the properties on Tivoli Park Avenue. Again, you can see that change in level. And then again, going to the left of this image, you can then see you've got some stuff that's being stored on site at the moment. And then if I go to the next one, again, just to show that 3D image, so that effectively back of a truck that we had or container unit is in this area here. So you can see that relationship again, and then you've got the area of the site which is a separate use, not part of the application site at the rear. Turning around then, just looking at the other end of the other side of the site, you can see the collection of different industrial uses that are present. And looking at what that looks like from the ground, you can see it's sort of elevated, sort of 2-storey in height, but single-storey with a large pitch roof. And then this is right at the back of the site. So this is where the access runs to, that runs along, so if I go back, that runs all the way along this building, and you can see just in this corner here a series of properties which are then present, you can see here. So you can see there's an access all the way through to the back of the site. So there is a previous approval on this site in particular. So there was an application in 2016 for the erection of 3 industrial units. The image on the left-hand side that shades these units red and blue, the red shows what would be B1 and B8 uses. So in the old use classes order, that was light industrial and storage and distribution uses, with the blue half of the building to be I think it was B1 and B2 uses. B2 is general industrial, so they are the noisier, potentially smellier uses, which obviously require quite a lot of controls if they're anywhere near residential properties. So that application was approved by committee in 2016 under pretty much the same policy that we've got now in the new local plan, which is about retention of employment sites, which supported these uses. So that permission is not extant, it wasn't implemented. So it's granted but wasn't implemented. So the proposal itself, as mentioned, it's for 58 light industrial units. As a sort of headline summary, they're proposing to keep all the trees that are around the site. You can see it shown on this, this site plan. It provides for two vehicle spaces per unit, with visitor spaces provided as well, to provide in total 138 parking spaces. Just to show you again, in terms of the neighbouring properties, just so members can get the idea, you've obviously got that raised section again, that semicircle raised section, and then the gap between Tivoli Park Avenue properties and the trees before you then get to the site and the units. So looking at it in a bit more detail, I'm going to just go through the three site plans that make up the whole, and then we'll just look at the elevations in a bit more detail. So this is the front of the site, where they are proposing to add, so remove some of the embankment on the left-hand side of the access as you go in, to create some additional parking spaces. You've also got a pedestrian footway that's being incorporated either side, and obviously down one side as well. The areas in yellow are areas that are indicated to be open space. As mentioned, the detail of that landscaping would be part of any reserve matters if permission is granted. This triangle section of land here was previously proposed within this application to have a cafe on it. However, that was removed from the proposal at the urging of officers, given the allocation of the site for the particular use. That area has now got, obviously, it's got these two parking spaces here. And then you've got the start of the units, obviously in this section of the site in the lower part of the image. Then moving through, in just a bit more detail, you've got this showing the layout of those units with the road, as mentioned by the representation, on the right-hand side of the image, with the access in, with the different units fronting onto those roads. You've then got all the trees on the left-hand side of the image, and the embankment. You can see a retaining wall that's proposed to run around that embankment, which is indicated by the double thickness line. And then looking down at the southern part of the site, you just see the rest of the layout. You can see that access point on the right-hand side of the image there, which ran to that the yard that you could see, where you could see the houses behind in the photo. So just to look in a bit more detail at the design of the units themselves. So taking the top of the site and looking at these units here. This is the set of units that fronts to the north of this image, so where it fronts onto this parking area here. So the elevations of the proposals have grade cladding, so it's an industrial appearance unit. The units, as we'll look at when we look at the side elevations, have brick gable ends facing into the access road to the site with some glazing as well. Just important to note on this particular set of units, you can see that units 7 and 8, which if I click through, you'll now see on the left-hand side of the image, which are the ones that are closest to railway terrace, are obviously set down in height, specifically because of the relationship with the railway terrace. But as you've seen from the images, there is a significant change in land level, which we consider is particularly relevant when looking at the impact on those properties. So this is the elevation that fronts one of the internal access roads. This is the style of the brick gable with the glazing, the sort of floor-to-ceiling glazing that's proposed, or close to floor-to-ceiling glazing, that fronts the access road. And then the other side is the more industrial grey cladding. Looking at those units, they are single-storey, but they are sort of double height internally. So there's no internal mezzanines that are proposed as part of the scheme. So then just looking at the first full row of properties, if we take the elevation that's facing to the north here, you can see, again, same design of properties. Important to note, on the right-hand side of this image, you can see where the retaining wall is and then the change in level with the embankment where those trees are. So the idea is that the embankment is not changed by the proposal. The development goes up to it with the retaining wall, but it is retained. And then looking at the other side, so now the embankment is going to go on the left-hand side of the image, so with the properties on Tivoli Park Avenue on the left of this image. So you can see the change in land level. And then moving through the site again, same design for the gable ends and same design for the inside. Moving through then, the designs are the same for all these units, and then looking at the midsection again, so you can see at this section of the site, on the left-hand side, there's more of a distance for the neighbouring properties because of the embankment itself, and again, that's now on the right-hand side there, and then on the left-hand side. And then the last lot of units, which are these ones, obviously not quite so wide and not quite so many units. Again, on the right-hand side, you can see the embankment, and then on the left-hand side, which obviously then is the back of the site, which faces towards the other industrial open storage use that's to the rear of the site. And then this is the side elevation. So in terms of considerations, character and appearance, obviously the design is industrial in nature. It's not a designated area in terms of conservation area, and we do think the design is appropriate for an employment site, given the collection of uses that are around there. In terms of living conditions of neighbouring properties, given the change in land level as well as the orientation of properties and of the commercial units or where they face inside the site, don't consider that there's going to be any overlooking. There are no side windows that face towards the residential properties. And given the distance from rear windows as well as that change in levels, it's not considered that they would result in any sense of enclosure to neighbouring properties. Now, one of the issues that came up during the course of the application was the use proposed was slightly unclear, which resulted in some additional consultation. And one of the suggestions was that they were proposing to have what was the old B2 uses, well, actually, still B2, which is general industrial, which would have raised concerns given the layout and the potential impact on neighbouring properties. So these are down as I mentioned, the light industrial units, but we still did receive a noise impact assessment on the basis of what the impact could be on residential properties. This was submitted following comments from the environmental health team. They looked at the background noise levels, and the outcome of that was that the impact on residents would be acceptable, subject, however, to conditioning of opening hours. So specifically, there is a planning condition that's recommended to members for restrictions on 9 till 6 p.m. So 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday, and 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on Saturday. And on that basis, it's not considered that the officers have any objection to the impact on residential amenity. In terms of environmental matters, there's a series of contaminated land conditions that are proposed, specifically because of the previous uses on site. There was a phase 1 desk-based survey which was submitted as part of the application. However, for any development on this site, it requires a phase 2 intrusive investigation, and there are Grampian conditions proposed, which would include any remediation that's required to get it up to the standard necessary for a commercial unit before any development should take place on the site. There's also a condition which proposes a control on piling in terms of foundations for potential to create pathways to the aquifer. In terms of ecology, we have received comments from KCC Biodiversity that are in the report. Obviously, the existing site, the majority of it is, as you've seen, hard surface with some grass growth. However, it's the boundaries of the site that are the key elements here. And obviously, whilst the boundaries are being retained, we still expect sites such as this to provide a net gain to biodiversity. And therefore, it is proposed for a series of conditions, one of which includes a lighting plan to be submitted if for any external lighting to ensure that it's designed appropriate to the guidance with regards to biodiversity impacts for lighting. As well as that, it would be required in any reserve matters to provide details of the enhancements proposed. And obviously there is some open space to enhance the existing hedgerow, well, not hedgerow, sorry, the existing bank areas, which could have additional planting proposed on them. On that basis, with conditions, we consider the impact on ecology to be acceptable. In terms of drainage, the previous application was accompanied by a flood risk assessment, and the applicant has resubmitted that flood risk assessment, which KCC have looked at to see whether or not the principles of what's being proposed is acceptable. Fundamentally, the previous assessment done on the old scheme related to permeable paving for around that building, because you'll recall from the image, pretty much the whole site was covered in building. And in this instance, what's being proposed is that any hard surfacing would be permeably paved to allow for infiltration through, with certain controls being required within, obviously, buildings in terms of runoff. However, again, this would be subject to granting conditions saying no development should take place until details of both foul water, which obviously is subject to a separate consents regime in terms of the Water Infrastructure Act, but to also include surface water drainage, that scheme is provided. And obviously it goes hand in hand with a landscaping scheme, which would obviously have to come forward at reserve matters. So in terms of highways considerations, the site is highly sustainable. It's obviously in walking distance of the station, and highways have looked at this, looked at the application and raised issues initially with the transport assessment that was submitted. Obviously, members will have seen from the photos, the condition of the access is far from ideal in terms of the surfacing. Obviously, this would, resurface that access and provide pedestrian footway either side to allow for safer crossing than currently exists. In terms of issues within the site, in terms of parking levels, that has been looked at obviously by KCC Highways and considered that both the proportion of parking per unit, but also the addition of visitor spaces is considered to be sufficient. There are also on-street controls on the road outside the access, yellow lines on both sides. Now, admittedly, that I appreciate that doesn't stop people parking on yellow lines, but it is a matter that's not controlled by planning legislation. It's required by parking enforcement. So on that basis, it's not considered that the development in itself would result in unauthorised parking as a definitive outcome from the basis of the amount of parking that's provided on the site. Again, visibility displays, it's not changing, particularly the displays that are existing on the access at the moment, so that is considered to be acceptable. In terms of mention that's been made of turning on the site, this wasn't an issue that was raised by highways in terms of turning. This is showing, if I go to this image, so I talked about the hoarding that runs around this site in particular. You have the access point here, this gate here, which runs to the open storage at the very rear of the site where we saw that image, and then we have the access that runs down to the other industrial units on the left-hand side. So this area is not changing in terms of there's no changes proposed to this. It's going to be hard surfaced on the plan. So if I go back to the plan, you'll see that section there. And obviously turning has been provided for vehicles using these units themselves. Obviously there's no restriction on the vehicles that could use this site. In terms of the point earlier about a larger vehicle delivering to one of these particular units, then there's no restriction on any vehicle coming down here. It is a point, obviously, that highways have looked at. They've looked at the existing situation on site. They've looked at the ability of vehicles to turn on site and accessing the units that you can find further down in this area here to the north to the top of the image. And again, it has not been raised as an issue as a point of objection from KCC Highways that would indicate that there is going to be a substantial harm to highway safety from vehicles having to reverse out down that road. I'm not aware of how much that occurs at the moment. If it may be that it doesn't occur because of the space, but the space that's available is actually in this turning area here. And also, if I go back to the aerial image, sorry, I'm just going to skip through all of these. Bear with me just so we can look at the aerial image, just so that members fully get an idea of the existing relationship with the sites. There we go. So this whole area here is obviously accessed via the gate, and then you've got this collection of vehicles at the areas at the moment. Obviously, actually, you've got on Google they've indicated where the Can-Do Timber Supplies unit is, and that is obviously accessed via that triangle of land. So it's not considered that this development in itself would result in a significant worsening of highway safety on the basis of what has been proposed. To pick up the point that's been raised with regards to access to Railway Terrace, so the proposal does not include any new access to Railway Terrace via this site. This is dealt with in the report. The issue here is that obviously what we're talking about is a private site. I don't think there's any argument that there could potentially be a betterment if there was an additional access that was provided to Railway Terrace. However, there is no requirement on this development, nor is there harm that we would be able to refuse the application on from not providing it. This development does not make the existing situation any worse by virtue of the fact that this site is effectively closed off and unavailable for access at the moment. And so in terms of actually requiring an access through this site, it's not justifiable as a planning condition, and it wouldn't meet the tests of condition accordingly, and officers could not sustain a reason for refusal to appeal on those grounds. So overall, we consider that the proposal would be in accordance with the local plan, and specifically obviously the employment allocations, and there are a number of safeguarding conditions that would certainly be required to ensure that any impacts were controlled and mitigated appropriately, and the recommendation is to approve. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Could the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman-Cook. Members? Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got no problem at all with the design of the structures. It's an industrial site, and it has no effect on the local amenity in that respect. I do have concerns in relation to the top 8 units, which are the closest to Railway Terrace, because I'm just looking at that, it really does seem that everything's been crammed into that site, that it seems that there's too many units on that site, and certainly my knowledge of industrial units is that they'll be overwhelmed with cars, be overwhelmed with it either side, deliveries, etc., etc. So my concern, really, Chair, is on the impact that those top units will have on Railway Terrace. Certainly, if I remember correctly, and perhaps maybe Mr. Livingstone will remind me or put me straight, but he did say they was going to do some work around the around that kind of semicircle in relation to the verge, or whatever you want to call it there, and that gives me concern in relation to the trees, because as a resident has said, they're vital to them, for them to retain, to keep noise out to a certain degree. If this is not possible for those top 8 not to be there, and also that top 8, if they're not there, that releases further parking, so the vehicles don't have to come down or into site, so they can be parked up there, because what will happen is that the people who work in the units will park on the 2 spaces, and there'll be nowhere for visitors to actually go. So I think that parking area needs to be bigger at the top. But should this not be the case, and members decide to would decide to approve it as is, can I ask Mr. Livingstone if there was any thought of any acoustic fencing being put up on the if you like, on the Railway Terrace side of the tree line, or indeed on the other side of the tree line, which won't damage them, but would keep out any noise. So it's just a question on that. Thank you, Chair.
So if I... Sorry, let me just go back, all the way back through the images. So the proposal... There we go. So the proposal is to retain all of the trees, and obviously the detail of the landscaping and how the trees would effectively be safeguarding would be part of the reserve matters application, because it's landscaping. Obviously the council could look if there was any concern about those trees and both the amenity but also the sort of screening that they provide, then certainly we could look at a TPO on those trees. It'd probably be a group order, because individually they're probably not of necessarily a standard to TPO them individually. We'd certainly look to try and secure it through the planning application itself when the reserve matters would come in. To your point about acoustic fencing, so the noise impact assessment looked at the background noise levels and then looked at what this projection would be with the units that are there. It wasn't considered by environmental health that you would need an acoustic fence along there, basically mainly on the operating times. So that opening hours condition, meaning that you can't do it before 9, you can't do it after 6 p.m. On that basis. And it wasn't considered a necessity. In terms of the parking in that area, again, in terms of losing units from there, the parking level has been considered to be acceptable. Obviously, for a refusal on parking grounds, there has to be a sort of evidence severe impact on the network, and the difficulty here is in justifying that is the on-street controls and again the fact that they are adding visitor parking and different bits and pieces. But I accept what you're saying in terms of it's closer to the trees at that point in the site because of the shape of the site, really.
In that case, Chair, could I ask then for Mr Livingston to consider when the landscape proposals come in, should this be approved, that they consider acoustic fencing?
Yep. That sounds fine. Thank you, Councillor
Thank
Orban.
you.
Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. I know this area passably well. I'm not particularly from Margate, but I certainly know the main road entrance near where Railway Terrace is. One question, I'm just trying to remember the name of the road that the other exit comes into.
All Saints
The back-
Avenue.
What is?
All Saints Avenue.
It is. Okay, I thought it would be. Thank you. I'm looking at that, and I've worked on industrial estates in various ways, and I think that the parking is going to be inadequate. There is, particularly for staff, among other things, and if those light industrial units have got their own vehicles as well. Now, I appreciate that it's actually near a railway station and it's on a bus route, but that doesn't mean to say that people are actually going to use public transport. So I am concerned that there is inadequate parking, and I am also concerned about those turning angles as well, as raised by the resident at the beginning. So I, like Councillor Orban, I think there are too many units in there, and I think those things need to be looked at again.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. The concerns I have with this are equal to my other councillors, Crittenden and Orban. I don't think there's enough parking. We all know that these sites have enormous amounts of visitors and staff who work there. But the other thing I have is, if you're at the end, bottom end of that screen, how the hell are you going to get an Arctic to turn into there and get back out? And that is an issue, because these places will have articulated lorries turning up. And if they say they're not, they are, because these people do have, if you have a double glazing company, for example, they're just going to have Arctics of glass turning up, and they're not just going to have a little transit van turning up with 30 or 40 tonnes of glass. So I do have concerns about that. And also I do have concerns about these trees. I do agree they should have a TPO order, a group TPO order on them. But I also think that somebody has to be liable for the maintenance of those trees, because one company who has unit number 8 isn't going to look after trees 13, 14 and 15, for example. They won't want to take on that cost. So I think that needs to be put into the plan as well, who's going to maintain the boundary lines. But apart from that, I'd like to know how wide that road is that's going alongside, so that there is turning room for an articulated vehicle, because I've driven articulated vehicles, and they do take some manoeuvring to get into a good space, and not everybody's very good at it, and, you know, some of them are huge, absolutely huge.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm also a little bit unclear about this access and egress, because our speaker tonight said that he thinks it's impossible for large vehicles to turn, whereas the report states no objection, this is KCC Highways, no objection is raised regarding the layout for vehicles manoeuvring within the site to be able to leave the site in a forward gear. So is that assuming that they're not large vehicles?
Do you wish?
Yeah, the comment we've got is exactly as you say. I mean, I think the point that I suppose I cannot clarify is the transport assessment, obviously, as mentioned, is based on appears to use, and actually you can see in the image, you see there, you can see some tracking plans that are done there on the basis of a 13-metre vehicle. Obviously, the concerns that have been raised relate to, well, what if there is a much larger vehicle that's using to serve these units? Obviously, these units are not large industrial units. However, in terms of the consideration, obviously, you know, highways would be expected to look at what you'd get on an industrial site, and indeed, those units at the back there, and obviously mention's been made of this the timber supply units, which obviously actually access directly off that triangle at the moment that you can see here. So in terms of turning for other businesses on the industrial estate isn't changing by virtue of this. The issue, though, is whether or not this site makes adequate arrangements for turning of larger vehicles or not. And clearly this is a concern that, you know, I appreciate a number of members have got. So I think if we carry on and then we'll come back on this point.
Thank you, Councillor Wing.
Thank you. I mean, I share the same concerns. I mean, I think we're agreed that this is a good use of the site and would tidy the site up, because the site does look to be a bit ramshackled. But I think there's too many in there. Ian, can you give the elevations? Because we can't see the height of the lower buildings at the top in relation to Railway Terrace. Have we got the height of Railway Terrace and the height of? Normally we get an elevation where you see the next door property and the
section. Yeah. So the image that we've got here is well, if I go back.
It might just be giving us the height of the lower buildings and the height.
So it's giving the height of the lower buildings that then shows that if in this image here where you've got the 3 and then the 5, if you can see that. So the 5, you can see then you've then got a gap and then you've got a change in level. So this is the image of then the 2 units 7 and 8, which are the nearest ones there, and you can see a change in level of 5 metres. Now the report talks about the distance, and if I go back, to the site plan showing the neighbouring property. Sorry, I'm going to have to go all the way through the images. Bear with me.
It's my fault. I'm quite.
No. This is an important point. So you can see again. You can just see again the change in levels that we've got. But if you look at this image here, you can see that the properties that are closest to the end property in Railway Terrace. The Railway Terrace, the closest property is 7.3 metres, I think it is, from the corner to the corner of this development. But because of the 2 metre height difference and the fact that it's the reduced units in scale, excuse me, it's not considered in terms of sense of enclosure. We usually look and make sure that there are views out and over and they're not actually directly affecting habitable rooms. So in this case, the orientation of the properties is considered to be sufficient, but mainly it's the change in level specifically.
I mean, I do think there's too many units there. We all know that industrial units. I use the Pisons industrial unit quite a lot, and it's scattered with cars parked all over the place. And articulated lorries regularly have trouble coming out. So I don't know whether it's not a direct refusal, but just suggesting that they lose a pair of units off of each end and two of the nearest ones up by Railway Terrace to provide more parking and to enable better turning for larger vehicles that are clearly going to visit the site. That's my concern. I think we're all agreed it would be good use of that land to...
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, I think we've got to consider what we've got in front of us at the moment, and it's been, as Mr Livingston said, it can be looked at. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I share concerns about the number of units on the site. I mean, it's overcrowding as far as, if it's houses, it would be overcrowding. And hopefully, we'd like to see successful businesses in the units. And if all of those units are successfully occupied and busy and all doing good business, that's going to be busier than Piccadilly Circus, going in and out of there, and there'll be all sorts of vans trying to get in, lorries trying to get out. It just seems overpopulated to me. And the other thing I'm really just a little bit unclear about is the relationship with the existing site, which is on that picture next to the railway, isn't it? Well, on the picture that was just there, isn't it? Yeah, there. So although you're saying they're not related in terms of vehicles coming in and out and articulated lorries turning, as far as I can see, there is only one access point to both sites, isn't there? Which is on the plan you showed us. It's obviously going to be looks like it's going to be relaid road with a pathway, but that is the road that will be used not just for this site, will it? It will be used for the whole lot. So there will be, where there are lorries or whatever there are going into the site that's already there, they'll be coming through that entrance on the site that was on the final plan. So, I mean, I'm pretty unhappy about the whole application. And as you say, we can't make suggestions. We deal with this as we see it. So I'm currently minded to recommend refusal of this, and it might help me to better visualise all of this if we actually were able to go on site and see how everything relates to each other. So I think that would be my favoured option. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Hart, bring you back.
Thank you, Chair. Ian was saying at the beginning that they're not two-storey units, but they are in height, but there's no mezzanine. So they're not going to overlook those properties. But if the owner of that property decides to put one in, so he can put an inner steel in and put a mezzanine on there for storage or to turn it into an office, what is stopping them, or is it going to be a condition of planning that they can't?
So in terms of adding floor space, in terms of adding a mezzanine, I'm trying to remember. In terms of permitted development, I believe that you could add a steel for, say, well, as you say, storage. The issue is because particularly thinking of impact on living conditions in terms of overlooking, all the windows are facing into the site, so there are no first floor windows facing towards the property the other side. In terms of increasing the floor space, there wouldn't necessarily be any objection to that, but obviously that, I suppose, could be factored into the question of do you increase the amount of deliveries, the need for parking on the site. So if it was considered appropriate, we could look at whether or not a condition would be possible to restrict. Obviously, we've got a plan condition, which says you've got to build it in accordance with these plans. But the question is whether or not the insertion of a mezzanine is actually development under the Planning Act and would require permission on its own, and I don't believe it would. We will look into that whilst the discussion goes on, just to check that point.
Also, my question is twofold, really. Excuse me. So if one person or one company has one unit, would they be able to make the other unit next to them into an adjoining unit? So they're doubling their spaces. So therefore they will need bigger vehicles to come and service their area. So it's all part and parcel of the same thing, really.
I don't believe that would be development under the Planning Act, so I don't think it would require permission. The question is whether or not there's an intensification which results in a material change of use or not. I don't believe that it would require consent definitively. Again, the point would be whether or not that would come about. If it came about after the development was fully completed and therefore the plan condition was complied with, I don't think it would necessarily need a subsequent application. Again, this is something that could be restricted by virtue of condition. The question is what the ground would be for that condition and whether or not there is harm from that happening if a bigger unit was made. And I don't necessarily think that there's an automatic harm that's created by that, because obviously that unit then has 2 lots of parking spaces from what it had originally, for example, if we're just talking about parking, for example.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Orban, you wish to come back?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, I'm mindful about the use of the site, and as members have spoken, this is an industrial site, and that's what it will be. I'm mindful as well, Chair, of thinking forward as to should we refuse it on whatever grounds, that it will go to appeal, and it's likely that we would probably not succeed at appeal. So I'm mindful of that. Through you, Chair, would it be, could we ask this to be put back to officers to negotiate with the applicants to reduce the amount of units, which would then probably allow an increase of vehicle movement within the site, and also to then look at acoustic fencing, etc., and parking. So to save, because the way it's going, Chair, it's likely that we're likely to refuse this application. So I'm just saying, is that a way forward? Thank you.
As always, Councillor Orban, you have a very good point there, and I will pass over to Ian again.
We've talked before about when there's been the question of whether or not we should move to a site visit, if the discussion is going that particular way, for example, if enough people in the committee mention it. We haven't hit the magic 7 number to hit the half of members that have particularly raised this, but I do understand that those that have spoken very clearly about the concerns on this matter. It is a consideration for the chair and vice chair, because obviously we have a motion on the table that if we're not voting on that motion, if members are not voting on that motion, then that motion has to be withdrawn and then a new motion to be proposed. I understand the concerns that members have raised, and I may have already drafted that precise motion that Councillor Orban has been talking about whilst members have been speaking. But I think it's a decision for the chair whether or not we don't proceed with the vote on the current motion that's in front of us.
Thank you, Ian. Put the ball in my court. Paid for, yeah. That's a bit of a tight one, Councillor Orban. What I will say, and I know all I'm going to say, I do know this site very well, and I know I'm not going to give you any influence, because I don't, and I think you know that since I've been your chair. And it's very interesting what I've heard tonight. I have my own feelings, because I do know the site very, very well for reasons of past years and what was on that site, and that's showing my age again, which I often do. But I hear what members are saying here tonight about overcrowding and so forth, and the turning of vehicles. I feel it would be fair to members to withdraw this application if the Vice Chair agrees, or the motion, sorry. So I will propose the motion is withdrawn. I would like the Vice Chair to second that.
I'll second that, Chair.
And it's been brought forward about a site visit. Yes, Ian, I'll bring Ian back.
So a member would have to propose a motion, but listening to the discussion, we've had a one mention of a site visit, but it's pretty clear from those members that have spoken, and had 5 or 6, that the issue primarily is about the number of units, the turning for vehicles within the site, and the level of parking. There are other issues that have been raised, but those are the key ones that I think there is clear consensus on. So if a member was minded to move the motion for defer and delegate to officers to seek additional information on turning within the site for larger vehicles and a reduction in the number of units to increase parking and turning, and bring that back then to members for consideration and determination.
That's the Thank you, Councillor Alban. You've heard that, and it's been seconded by Councillor Crittenden. Do members agree?
We need to vote on it.
Yes, we've got come in.
Thanks. I mean, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying when that does come back, if it does come back in a different format, it still might help us if we have had a site visit to actually see the site, so we can see how this all fits together. Well, it certainly helped me anyway. And if no one else agrees, then we won't have one. But I would like to suggest that we would have one.
If I suggest to you go buy some timber in the wood yard up there, you can have a look at the site. Members, we've had a proposal to defer and delegate, and I think it's been explained very well, and again a very good debate, and seconded. Those who agree? Those against? I agree as well, Stephen. That has been carried, and thank you, Ian. Thank you, members.
Chair, sorry to
You want to come for a break, do you, or something?
I think some of our public
I was
don't
going
quite
to.
understand what's just happened, Chair.
Right, to the yes, I will ask our Planning Applications Manager to explain exactly what has happened with committee and the decision made, so you're aware.
So the application hasn't been determined this evening, so it's been put back to officers to seek changes to the plans. Once those changes have been received, we would look to consult residents on those plans. If changes are not received, then it would have to come back to Planning Committee for a determination because it's been called in. And in the same way, if we do get amended plans in and officers consider that that chimes with what members have asked for this evening, then again, it will then be reported back to Planning Committee for determination. And again, in the same way as in this meeting, anyone that's written in will be notified by letter and given the ability. We'll try and put it as a schedule item if people do want to speak on that.
No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I know I was quite blunt saying that to you, sir, but no, we're not allowed to. I'll be told off again. But I hope you understand. The decision, and yeah, so you will be notified. And thank you for your attendance there tonight. Agenda item 4B, which is land south of the Millennium Way, Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Thorpe. Mr. Thorpe, I believe you're there. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, members. My name is Luke Thorpe, here to represent L&T Care Developments and highlight the benefits of our proposed investment. We are the country's leading care home developer and have extensive experience in developing and operating care homes across the country. Of our partner company, Ideal Care Homes Operational Homes, all have achieved ratings of either good or outstanding by the Care Quality Commission. We are proposing to regenerate this site, which has stood vacant and underutilised for over 20 years, to provide a care home for the local community and people with a local connection. The site was recently split into employment and housing allocations, which created a significant barrier for delivering feasible and viable development in this location. Our proposals address this and meet the Council's policy aspirations to provide much needed residential accommodation and boost job growth and economic performance, principally by providing a purpose-built high-quality accommodation for older people who need general or dementia care, creating over 50 jobs, training and career development opportunities, and boosting the local economy through greater spending at local supply chain and service businesses. This will benefit local people looking for work and local older people who will have a greater choice of care accommodation to meet their changing needs. A consequent effect will be more local homes released into the market for aspiring families and first-time buyers. In terms of the environmental benefits, the proposed design reflects the nature of its use and the character of the local area, complementing existing homes within the community and providing an appropriate relationship with neighbours. Pollinating, sensory and habitat-friendly landscaping will attractively frame the building and establish healthy and biodiverse amenity spaces. To mitigate the effects of climate change, the care home has been designed to be water efficient and generate a majority of its energy needs on-site using solar power and ground source heating. Parking will be provided within the site, including for electric vehicles, with the amount being more than suitable for the number of staff and visitors likely to be present at any one time. Alongside this, staff and visitors will be encouraged to walk, cycle and use public transport through the implementation of our travel plan. The benefits available to the local community, environment and economy are substantial, but most importantly, the proposals offer what local older people deserve most: a sense of community and home, a great quality of life and care, and a comfortable, healthy and familiar living environment. I am happy to say that the proposals and recommendation before you are highly appropriate and deliverable. This investment is not speculative, and the associated benefits can be achieved within the next 2 years if this application is approved today. I therefore trust that members will support this application and vote in favour of the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thorpe. Speaking with concerns of this application is Mr. Heaney. Mr. Heaney, good evening to you. Okay, you have 3 minutes to speak.
Yeah. My main reasons for objecting to this proposal is the woefully inadequate and lack of on-site parking as proposed in the plans of only 20 spaces. For a development of this size, in my opinion, this is inadequate. The proposed on-site spaces will probably be used by vehicles of the essential permanent support staff without including carers. This is a large site of with the equivalent of a small hospital. The facilities that would be where the people would take up the spaces will be care home management staff, on-site catering staff, on-site maintenance, laundry staff, cleaners, administrative support, financial support, on-site trainers and ad hoc visits. Based on the England National Care Home average of 1.65 carers per residence, assuming 66 residents, this equates to approximately 109 carers if the site was full. Where exactly are these employees going to park their cars? There is no public transport and people do not cycle to work. As stated in my letter of objection, these vehicles are likely to be parked in the nearby housing estate roads, close by where I and others live. More on-site parking needs to be provided before this is approved. KCC Highways carried out a road and parking investigation on a previous planning application. To ensure conformity in dealing with this matter regarding parking in this junction area, an updated highways report should be arranged. Bearing in mind the likely extra vehicles parked both sides of Northwood Road and the Silvers. However, clear guidance was given by Kent Highways at the time in regard to another planning application which involved traffic movement and parking in that area. I would suggest that committee members may wish to look up planning application number F/20 TH/130601 under Transport and Parking. KCC Highways have given clear guidance on this matter in this specific junction area, which will be even more relevant today as traffic volumes have increased since that date of the last inspection. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Heaney. I will ask the planning officer, which I believe is Emma, to outline this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the application site outlined in red on this plan here. So we've got Northwood Road on the right-hand side and Millennium Way running along the top of this plan. And you can see Northwood Court in this location here, and some retail units in this location here, and residential properties opposite the site. So this is an aerial view of the site. So this is the site in this location here. So it includes this building and this area of land up to these boundaries here. You can see in terms of its location, this is the existing Tesco's in the middle of Westwood, so it's on the edge of the town centre, and the other existing retail units to the south of that. Here is the Kent Innovation Centre and the former Christchurch University buildings in this location here. And you can see residential on the eastern side of the road. So the site lies within an area in the Thanet local plan that's allocated for both residential use and employment use. So this is the application site area here. So the purple area is the employment allocation, and so this part of the site falls within the employment allocation, and this area here is the housing allocation. So you can see in terms of the actual site location, the blue area is the town centre, so this is the Westwood in this location here. To the north of Millennium Way is the strategic employment site, and then to the south of Millennium Way is residential. So this originally all formed part of the employment site, but through the current local plan, this area here has been deallocated from employment use and is now in residential use. And you can see that that has extended up to Northwood Road on the right-hand side here. So this is just a closer view of the application site. So I've outlined it in red so you can clearly see the actual outline of the site. So again, you can see the area in purple is the employment use. So in terms of the employment use, the policy covering this is policy E01 of the Thanet local plan, and this actually looks to retain employment uses on the site that fall within storage, offices and light industrial uses. So in terms of the actual residential use, so that again the area hatched in brown, policy H01 covers this area, and this looks to retain the area for residential use and doesn't permit any alternative use on the land. So the application is brought before members as a departure to these policies. So this is the site here. So there's an existing building on the site. This formed part of a 1999 consent for 4 telecommunication buildings on the site. So only one of them has been built, which is this one here. It was never completed, and you'll see some photos in a moment inside the building. So it doesn't have any utilities inside the building. It doesn't have staircase between the floors, and there's no current windows within it. So it's a disused building. It's been there for 20 years. There's been lots of marketing of the site, and the site has never come forward for employment use. There's also a condition attached to the consent from the 1999 consent that limits the use of the site to telecommunications only. So if any alternative development were to come forward on this site, they would actually require permission to move away from a telecommunications use. So this view is taken from Northwood Road, looking towards the site. You can see that there's currently a landscape area to the front of the site. It's quite overgrown to the front. This again is taken with the building on the right-hand side. So all of this area that you can see here is all part of the application site. You can see a cycle path running along this part of the pavement. Again, a view taken. So that again, you now see the closest residential properties that are in Northwood Road. So there's a row of terrace units in this location here of 2-storey in height. And again, a closer view of the site. So the site is quite overgrown at the moment. It's got quite a few small sapling trees on the site. And And then this is now looking to the right-hand side. So the application site is this building here. So this is Northwood Court on the corner, and you can see the Innovation Centre in the distance here. So in terms of scale and height of buildings, you can see that this is a 3-storey building of quite a modern flat roof design. So compared to the residential properties that you saw to the west, which were quite traditional looking buildings. So there's a bit of a range in terms of design and materials and scale of buildings in this part of the road. This is now taken from the rear of the site. So this is, again, the existing building within the site that they're looking to demolish through this application. This is the gap between the building. So again, this building on the right-hand side is the building we're looking to demolish. And you can see the gap to Northwood Court on the left-hand side here. And then a bit further back, so some areas are hard standing to the rear, but also it's quite overgrown. There's been areas of where there's been some fly tipping around here. And then further back again, so this building here is a garage. I think in the report I'd said that this was actually a workshop, but actually it's actually a retail use that sells car parts. So it's actually not a workshop use, but a retail unit. This here is a substation, which is retained and it doesn't fall within the application site. And again, this is the substation with the application building in the distance there. And then this is looking, so this is at the rear of the site with the so this is within the application site with the employment building to the right-hand side, and this is looking towards the access road that then leads on to Millennium Way. So as part of the 1999 consent, this formed the access road that led into the site. But as part of the deallocation of this land, this now actually forms part of the residential allocation and is no longer part of the employment allocation. So this is another view of the access taken from the access road looking into the site. So this is the actual site itself. And then now back inside the site, just showing you some of the sapling trees and the area that's quite overgrown. And then this is the southern boundary of the site where there's quite a few trees that are looking to be retained as part of the scheme. So it's a bit of a landscape buffer along this southern boundary. This is inside the building, so it's quite dark. As I said, there's no utilities inside the building, so you can see it's never been used. And again, another view of it. So it's just got some storage material inside, and this is showing the staircase that started constructing but has never been complete, so there's no access between the ground first floor. So it's not a building that can easily suddenly accommodate an employment use. A company would have to come in and do quite a lot of work inside this building to make it usable. So the application is for a 66-bed care home. It's a 2-storey building. This is the proposed site plan showing the development. So the proposal was for a new vehicular access onto Northwood Road in this location here, so central to the site. So this is the location here of that existing building, and this is the proposed access. You can see it's quite a large building, but it does have quite a lot of space around it. Plans were amended during the submission, which have increased the distance to the rear boundary. So there's now 15 metres distance from the rear elevation to the rear boundary, and then again 15 metres to the side here to the substation, and then a distance of 19 metres to the neighbouring boundary here. You can see in this location here is the landscape buffer that you saw within the photo. So that's the area that they're looking to retain through this application. And along the front of the site, the proposal is to plant some new trees and have a new landscape buffer along that frontage, which, as you saw from the photos, there's quite a few there's a tree-lined street along there, so lots of trees to the front of Northwood Court and the Innovation Centre, so that would continue the tree planting along the road, make it appear in keeping in terms of the landscaping of the site. So to the front of the site is the parking area, so the proposal is for 25 parking spaces. And of those, there would be 2 disabled spaces, and 3 would be electric vehicle charging spaces. And there's also a cycle storage area in this location here, and the refuse storage is in this location here. So in terms of the actual building, whilst as I mentioned, it's large in scale, it is set back quite a good depth from the road. Also, in terms of the shape of the building, it's because of this shape, it's enabled the ridge line of the building to be kept quite low and has resulted in quite staggered elevations. So you'll see that now in the elevations. So this is the proposed front elevation facing onto Northwood Road. So you can see it's a two-storey building. It's got a central gable feature, and then to both ends there's a projecting section with a hipped roof. You can see there's, in terms of the materials, it's a mix of red brick and render, some dark grey windows and dark concrete roof. So in terms of the materials, it's more in keeping with the residential properties in the street, more so than the commercial buildings to the north. Then this is the rear elevation, so there's quite a good amount of glazing within the elevations. There's also proposing some cladding as well, which will help to break up the width of the elevations. And then these are the side elevations. So in terms of the views, as you're approaching the building from either direction, you'll see quite a small element here with a gap behind it, and this area here is then set back into the main bulk of the building. And then again, this is the other elevation. So this is the elevation from the neighbouring property side to the south. So in terms of the impact on neighbours, there's the 20-metre distance between the proposed first floor windows within the side elevation here and the nearest neighbouring properties. The fact that the landscape buffer has been retained, as well as this distance, and the fact that the windows that are proposed facing the neighbouring properties are actually only hallway windows, which aren't habitable room windows. It's not considered there would be a significant impact on overlooking from the development to the neighbours. In terms of noise and disturbance, there's a 25-metre distance between the parking area and number 100 Northwood Road. And it's considered this distance, again, is significant enough to reduce any significant impact from noise and disturbance, and also it's to the front of the property as well, not to the rear near their garden. In terms of the rear, we have considered the impact upon any future housing development within the housing allocation site, and this has resulted to the request that the building be set further away from the boundary. So now with this 15-metre distance, it's considered that should be acceptable to prevent any future impact on residential properties within that housing allocation area. And to the commercial buildings to the north, there's a 28-metre distance, and as I said, they're actually only retail units, and they're only open up till 5:30 in the evening, so it's not considered there would be any noise and disturbance from that on the future residents of the building either. So there's quite a substantial amenity space surrounding the building for future residents, and therefore the living conditions concerns are considered to be acceptable. In terms of parking, as you heard, there's some concerns from residents regarding the parking provision. So 25 spaces are proposed with the cycle store as well for 8 parking spaces. KCC Highways haven't raised any concerns with this. It's considered that the occupiers of the building, which is a care use, are unlikely to have vehicles themselves. So it's only likely to be staff and visitors that would be visiting the building. And based on the fact that the staff would be rotated and sort of over different times, not all there at once, and the fact that there would be sort of visitors, again, different times of the day, Highways have looked at this and considered that there wouldn't be a huge impact on highway safety or on the network from these vehicles, and the transport statement that's been submitted sort of explains that. They've also submitted a travel plan as well with it that looks at sustainable travel to and from the site, and that's been conditioned. Sorry, I'll just nip down whilst I'm talking about the highway bit. So this, in terms of the access, and this is the proposed access into the site. There's visibility space of the 43 metres by 2.5, which is considered acceptable in this location, and they're also proposing pedestrian crossing points at this point here along the footpath. So again, Highways have raised no concerns with that. So This is a plan just showing the building within the street scene, so it's not a plan that's up for approval, but it's an indicative plan, but it's showing the scale of the building in relation to neighbouring development. And again, you can see the space in between the proposed building and the neighbouring properties. It's quite a lot of space around the building, and therefore it's not considered that there would be a significant impact on the street scene, because whilst the building is large, the site is large enough to accommodate this building without any significant impact. And in terms of the ridge line, you can see it actually falls below the 3-storey height of the Northwood Court on the corner. So the main considerations with this application is the principal issues. So the site, as I mentioned, falls within an area allocated for housing. So whilst this is a residential use in terms of a care use, it unfortunately can't contribute to our housing supply. It's not, we can't use the figures of the bedrooms towards that. But national guidance does allow us to consider the dwellings that are going to be vacated as a result of residents that are moving into the care home. So there is a calculation that we can use for assessing this, and that's looking at basing it on 1.55 people, it equals 1 unit of accommodation that's been made available back into the housing market, and we can use that contribution towards our housing provision. So this application covers 20% of the housing allocation site. The overall housing allocation is allocated for 80 units. So proportionately, we would be looking to try and achieve 16 residential units within this portion of the site. So in terms of the actual dwellings that theoretically would be freed up from residents moving into this care home, there would be approximately 43 units of accommodation freed up that could potentially go back into the housing market and contribute towards our figures. Not all of these will necessarily be local, and we did look at whether we could restrict the occupation of the buildings so that the initial occupiers would all be local. But unfortunately, the applicant is not keen to have such a restriction and feels that there could be viability concerns and concerns with moral concerns, because they'd rather look at the need-based assessment of future occupiers rather than their location, and therefore they're not keen to accept such a condition. But what we would need is only 37% of the future occupiers of the care home would need to come from the Thanet area to result in enough houses freed up that would be equivalent to the 16 units that we would need to achieve on site to achieve the proportion for this allocation. So we feel that it's reasonable to assume that at least 37% are likely to be local, because it is probably the case that the majority would actually be local, and therefore we feel that there is whilst it's not technically in line with the policy, that there's enough evidence here in terms of the national guidance and the way it allows us to work this out to assume that there would be enough residential units provided that would contribute towards our local housing provision and need. So therefore it is considered to be an acceptable departure to that policy on that basis. In terms of the employment provision, so the employment policy restricts the use of the site to the uses I've mentioned, so office, light industrial and storage uses, but it does give the ability to look at alternative uses if a number of criteria are met. This includes the marketing of the site, and this has taken place. We've requested additional information through the application. Initially, only 6 months of marketing information was submitted, but upon going back to the agent and asking for additional information, we've actually found that there has been a lot more marketing that has taken place, and obviously the fact the site's been vacant for 20 years, there would have been a lot of marketing over that time, but we do have evidence now of at least 21 months of marketing, and there's been no one that's come forward for an employment use of this site. Now, one of these reasons could be the actual site that's remaining, so following the deallocation of part of this site, so this area that is all in red, which is the application site, originally fell part of the employment site, and with the 1999 consent, all of this would have had access from this point here, and there would have been the 4 employment units constructed. By the deallocation of this area, there's now no direct vehicular access to the actual employment site. So if this area were developed for housing, theoretically, then there would be, this area in theory would be landlocked unless they actually applied for a new vehicular access into the site. So there are quite a few restraints with the retention of this site for employment use. There's also limited space around it for trying to get the parking for if this were retained as employment use. Again, they'd have to come in and actually apply for alternative use because of the condition restriction. And the reason that policy have looked to deallocate this area from employment use is to do with the proximity to residential properties. So this area is still quite close to the residential properties. So again, future employment use here could still have some impact on residential. So again, in terms of this being a potential future employment use, it's quite limited, and that has been shown by the fact it has been vacant so long. So local plans have been consulted with the application. They have raised an objection to it on the basis that it would result in the loss of employment land, and this would reduce our employment land supply. But given the fact that there will be some employment generated by the site through the care home use, there would be 52, I think it is, people that would be full-time equivalent people employed by the care home. Whilst that's not in the type of employment use we're looking to achieve on this site, it would still have some economic benefits from that. And also given the fact that they have provided the market evidence to show that there's no interest in the site in coming forward, and the site restraints of the lack of access and the proximity of the allocated housing to around the site, it is felt that it is reasonable to consider this as an acceptable departure to the policy, especially given the need for a care home which is supported by KCC and is also supported by policy HO18, which does support accommodation for those in need of care support. So on balance, it is considered that the scheme does result in acceptable departure to both of those policies on the grounds that we will be achieving social and economic benefits from the development, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emma. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Cook, members. Councillor Crittenden.
Thank you. By and large, I support the intended use of the land. There are some things that do concern me. I do agree that there is, that probably is not adequate parking. I think the bin store looks too small. And I'm a little uncertain about some of the figures around the housing element on the grounds that most care homes cost more than the KCC standard amount that is paid. And we live in a very deprived area where most people cannot afford to pay care home fees. So I can understand why they don't want a limitation on local residents being in occupation. And I think it's not just a case of freeing up residential places, but also freeing up NHS bed blocking, which is a major issue. So I just want to throw those thoughts out there rather than specific questions. But I think the bin store's too small, and I think the parking is inadequate. And the bus, the loop does go into Tesco's, but it's not really a direct walking route from there. So it's probably a good 10-minute walk from Tesco's from the loop, so there is a bus route. Not great, so throwing them out.
Thank you, Councillor Garner.
Thank you. Yeah, I welcome there being a new care home. Care homes are something we do need in the area, so I'm not against having a care home built here on principle. My main concern here is the one that's been mentioned by the local resident and by Councillor Crittenden, and it is parking. And I think that I've really got a bit of an issue. I've got an issue with KCC highways. I think it's not the first time that we've been let down by their recommendations, and I'll tell you why in this particular incident. I mean, I'm the local ward councillor, and I speak to residents on the Wimpy estate quite regularly. especially a number of residents on the Silvers and on Northwood Road who struggle with the amount of parking on the junctions and along that road, which are causing dangerous access to the estate. I know the police are aware of this, and the police are patrolling the area more to try and stop people doing it. TDC Parking Enforcement visit the site quite regularly to try and catch people parking inappropriately at junctions. And I don't believe any of that has been taken into consideration by KCC Highways when they've said that the parking on site is adequate. They've just, by the look of it, looked at the drawings, looked at that, and have not taken any consideration about what's going on outside the site. And I know it makes it very difficult for us because KCC Highways have said everything's all right, so it's very difficult for us to do anything about it. But on this occasion, I believe KCC Highways have let us down in their report because they haven't taken all factors into consideration, and they've let the local residents down by doing the same. And it becomes very difficult for us to talk about it and raise objections about it. And I think that's something that I'm just keen to make that noted. I mean, the care home itself looks like a good care home to me, but it needs more parking. And there were just a couple of unrelated to parking issues I'd like to ask as well. As was mentioned, that is a housing site, and I know there are one of the applications for housing we'll be familiar with because it was at the top of Fairlawn Road that's been before us a couple of times. That's permission for houses. There's another application just the other side of the border of that for a number of other houses as well. So I just wanted to ask if the perimeter of that site, the care home site, is shall I say, inaccessible from those new houses that are going to be built? I.e., is there going to be a footpath entrance from the new houses when they'll be built, or will that just be totally encased? And one of the reasons I'm saying that is because when the new houses are built, some of the people who might like to visit this will be looking to park there when they can't park on the Wimpey estate, and it'll make it more difficult for them to access the site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. To Emma.
Thank you. I'll start with the footpath connection. So there's no footpath connections from this site to the surrounding area other than through the new access onto Northwood Road. In terms of actual parking provision, so we've got at the back of the local plan, we've got our parking standards, and the parking standards state how many parking spaces are required for different types of uses. So for this use, there would be the need for 1 parking space per 6 bedrooms and 1 parking space per 2 staff. So there's 66 bedrooms, so that means there would be a need for 11 spaces for residents, so that covers the visitor parking. And then in terms of the staff, looking through, whilst we've said there's 52 or 54 staff in total, that they're on a rota. So in terms of actual how many would be there at any one time, the statement submitted states that there would be around 24 staff there at any one time. So that would result in the need for 12 parking spaces. So we're looking at a maximum need of 23 parking spaces because it's maximum standards, and they're providing 25. So in terms of actual parking provision, it would be very difficult for us to justify any refusal on parking provision on the grounds that they meet and exceed maximum parking standards as set out within the local plan.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my other councillors as well with guiding parking. I don't think there's enough. But my other comment I've got on this is Emma very kindly showed us pictures of that building in comparison to the neighbouring property, which was an industrial property with regards to height, but not with regards to houses opposite or houses to the left. What is the height difference between those, please?
Can you, Emma?
They are mainly 2 stories. There are some bungalows in the road as well. So, sorry, I haven't really got a very good photo then of the residence. So you can see here, that's the 2-storey neighbouring property. Opposite the site, on the left-hand side here, there are some chalet-style bungalows. There's nothing exceeding 2 stories in height in terms of the residential properties, because opposite is the Wimpy estate where, again, they're all 2-storey there. So obviously this is proposing a 2-storey building, so the actual height of this building is basically in keeping with the general character of the area, which is mainly 2-storey in height. And then it's just this building on the corner, Northwood Court, that is the 3 stories, and the buildings beyond that start becoming larger. So in terms of this building, whilst it's large, the 2-storey height means it's quite a good transition building between the larger, taller buildings and then the smaller residential buildings, but it's a similar height to those.
Thank you.
Back on that, Chair. So how much taller than the residential properties will that be? As in, will it be 30 feet higher, 20 feet higher, 10 feet higher? Because it's quite considerable, really.
Sorry, I'll just click back through to this plan. So this plan attempted to show the level difference. So this is the proposed street scene. So the residential property is on the left-hand side of this, and then this is the scheme here. So in terms of the ridge height of the building, the proposed building, it shouldn't exceed the ridge height of the residential properties. Although I'm not sure I don't know how accurate this plan is. It's not forming part of the approved plan. It's an illustrative plan showing the scale of the building in relation to the neighbouring properties, but I'm not sure if it's just...
I mean, the only reason I asked that, Chair, sorry, to make a point, is that when we have that one on the Ramsgate Road, Margate, we agreed properties there wouldn't be that much more impressive or over the top of the local properties. And the one opposite the car wash, they are huge. And so they do stand out like a sore thumb. So they are very, very high. And what I don't want to do is approve a building that's going to be so out of keeping with the rest of the area that it's just not right. Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Councillor Orban.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to go back on Councillor Hart's point first, I mean, that is to be set back from the road, so it's not going to have an over-impact on the area, on the amenity of the area. The design's good. We need the nursing home, the care home. It creates employment. Of course, if we go back to the parking thing, you know, wherever you live, parking's a problem. And I'm sure that my Green colleagues here wouldn't want any more concrete and tarmac in that site over the grass. So I think that's fine, Chair, and I'm happy to go along with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warburton. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I echo Councillor Orban's comments. I think it's excellent use of land. I think it's well designed, and I totally agree about the parking. Unfortunately, having as much parking as we would like everywhere we go is a luxury we can't have these days, anywhere in the country. First of all, I thought it sounded quite short, but on thinking about it, not everybody is going to want the spaces at the same time. There aren't going to be many residents that need parking, and I don't think we can refuse on those grounds anyway. I think we won't have a chance, so I'm happy to support the application.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Right, I can't see any other speakers. Yes, Emma would like to come back. Emma.
Sorry, I just wanted to come back just to confirm the height, because I have now the measurements in case that's of use to you. So looking at this front elevation, to eaves level, it's 5.2 metres. The absolute maximum height, to this ridge height right in the middle of the building, it's 9.5 metres, and the majority of it is 8.5, so it is quite low in terms of the ridge height. And as I said in the presentation, this is because of the fact that the building's been designed with sort of a wide building at the front and then a gap and then a wide building at the back, so it's enabled the roof to be quite low because it's not a very deep building, those two elements.
Thank you for that, Emma. Right, members, I'm going to put this to you. For those in favour, please show. Those against? 1. Abstentions? No abstentions. That has been carried. Thank you, members. And I hope the applicant has noted, because you've got your places in the care home in the future, members.
We were thinking of you, Chair, really.
I thought you might be. Thank you. Thank you, members. Agenda item 4C, which is 20 St Mary's Avenue in Margate. Speaking against this application is Miss Utridge. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you.
Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Part of the proposed planning application seeks to build at the front of the house a first floor extension on top of the existing ground floor room, southeast facing side, to be used as a walk-in wardrobe and ensuite. The doubling in height of this wall will result in a significant loss of natural light to all our rooms facing this looming wall. Should it be approved, namely our kitchen, downstairs hallway, upstairs landing, separate toilet and bathroom. My partner and I feel that this part of the planning application will have a significant impact on the quality of life which we currently enjoy in our home, and we ask that it be taken into consideration. Indeed, we would kindly request a site visit so that you can gain a better understanding of the impact of the proposed doubling of the wall height. The case officer report submits that there may be some reduction in light and outlook to these windows, but goes on to say that they do not serve main habitable rooms. Well, we disagree. These rooms, particularly the kitchen, are used all the time, well, almost all the time. What is more, why should we have to turn on electric light during daytime in order to move from one room to another? I would go so far as to say that the building of a walk-in wardrobe and ensuite is not as important as our loss of natural light. Notwithstanding, the above, has the developer undertaken a BRE assessment? If not, we would ask that the council defer its decision until this has been made. Our second concern relates to the overall increase in size of the property. We do not feel it's in keeping with the size of the other properties in the road, but is disproportionately large. Neither is the design in keeping with the character of the other bungalows and the houses in the road. The case officer states in her comments that the property has a fairly unique appearance within the street and does not directly relate architecturally style to the neighbouring 2-storey buildings or to single-storey dwellings. We wholly agree with this finding. Is this not reason enough to deny the application in its present form? Thank you.
Thank you. I now ask the officer, Mr. Kenizema, to outline this application.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the application site outlined in red here. There's St Mary's Avenue on the right-hand side. We've got the church opposite the site, and to the south is Millmead Road, and to the left-hand side of the screen is Millmead Gardens. So this is the application site here. You can see it's a detached property. It has a garage to the left-hand, or right-hand side, but you can see on the left-hand side of this picture, and a conservatory to the rear, and both are being demolished through this proposal and new extensions built in their place. You can see that the neighbouring properties are also all detached properties. This is a view from the rear, so again this is the application property here, this is the rear view of that property. And this is now from street level, so looking at the application site from the street, so you can see it's got quite a low eaves level with a small gable projection on the left-hand side. This is their garage, so the application site boundary runs up to the right-hand side of the garage, and the garage is currently on the boundary of the site. And then a further away view. So in terms of this property, it's it's quite different in design to both neighbouring properties. So on the left-hand side, you can see the two-storey houses, and that's the same to the properties that keep going to the left-hand side. And then to the right-hand side, they become bungalows, and that's the same down the street as well. So this is a property in between a bungalow and a house, and you can see it's got therefore a ridge line that sort of runs extends between the two different ridge lines between the property, and is of a different design as well. So again, the application property is the one on the left-hand side here. Again, you can see the bungalows that then extend along the road. And on the left-hand side, so again, the application property is the building on the right-hand side, and then you can see the two-storey houses on the left of the photo here. And then a slightly wider view, so the application site is this one here, so it's also set back further than the neighbouring property. So whilst they do have a gable projection here, the front elevation of that gable projection is in line with the front elevation of neighbouring properties, and then the main bulk of the building is set back behind. And then again, the view here, so the application property is on the left-hand side behind these two-storey houses, and again, you can see opposite the site is the church and a screen of trees. And then this is taken from the right-hand side looking towards it, so again, that is the application property in that location there. So the proposal is for a first floor extension over that gable projection, a two-storey extension in this location here, which then is of a similar design to what results from that first floor extension, the demolition of the garage that's currently on the boundary, and the erection of a single-storey extension in this location here, and the demolition of the rear conservatory and the erection of a single-storey extension in this location here. So this is the existing front elevation, and this is now the proposed. So you can see the dotted red line is showing the height of the existing roof of that gable projection. There's an increase of 2.3 metres up to the new eaves level of this gable projection, and that will extend above it. The ridge line of the building is not increasing, so this remains the same. So the only changes are the erection of this first floor addition above the single storey, and then this is a two-storey front projection, which will then match the design of the left-hand side. Then on the right-hand side here, you can see the garage has gone, so the garage is in the place of the dotted red line, which was up to the boundary. This extension now extends away from the boundary, so there's now a 0.9 metre gap to the boundary with a parapet roof, and again, a design with windows and materials that will match the main building. This is the east facing elevation, sorry, it says west facing elevation, sorry, I get it right, west facing elevation. So this is the existing gable projection to the front, so the road is to the front, or to the left hand side of this slide. This is the existing garage in this location here, and this is the existing conservatory, and then this is the proposed elevation. So this is now the two-storey front projection in this location here, and this here is the single-storey side extension, and then you can see the rear extension at single-storey level projecting out in this location here. And this is the rear elevation as existing with the conservatory and the garage, and this is now it proposed. So again, it's all very similar design, parapet roof the whole way round. When it originally was submitted, it did propose a balcony area or roof terrace in this location here, so there was many concerns from residents regarding overlooking from this space. So plans have been amended to remove the roof terrace, and this is now shown as a balconette with French doors, so there's not considered to be any direct overlooking from this opening now. And then this is the view, so to the neighbour to the left-hand side. Again, this is the existing front gable, the rear conservatory, and then the proposal. So you can see the first floor front extension in this location here, and again you can see the rear extension in this location here. So in terms of openings within the side elevation, at first floor level there's no additional openings, it's just the existing openings that remain the same. So there's no overlooking from first floor level directly to any neighbours. And at ground floor level there are a few additional openings, but again these would be at ground floor level behind any boundary treatment. So this is the existing floor plan at ground floor level, and this is the proposed. So again, this is ground floor projection here to the front of the property. again, the side extension. So this extension set back 3.6 metres from the front elevation, 0.9 metres from that boundary. And then to the rear, this extension here, which replaces the conservatory, which is of the same depth. So this extension to the rear is 4 metres deep. And you can see that this is also set off the boundary by around 0.9 metres as well. And then this is the existing first floor plan, and then the proposed first floor plan. So you can see the projection here of the first floor front extension, and the projection here of the 2-storey front projection. And then there's also a small infill projection at first floor level as well between the two, but you can see that's quite set back from those gables. And then existing roof plan and proposed roof plan. So the main issues are the impact on the character appearance of the area and the impact on living conditions. So in terms of the impact on living conditions, just looking at this proposed block plan, you can see there's quite a distance to both neighbouring properties from the proposed extensions. So to number 18, which is in this location here, the 2-storey front extensions located 5.4 metres from number 18, and there's a distance of 7.8 metres from the first floor extension to number 22. This plan shows that in terms of looking at the path of the sun will be passing round starting from the east here, going round to the south here. So in terms of the impact on 22, there should be no impact in terms of light, because the extension is to the south of that property, to the north of that property. And then in terms of the impact on number 18, again, you can see the distance. Obviously, this is only single storey at this level here, so the nearest 2-storey is quite a distance from that property. And in terms of the distance, the path of the sun, it's not considered that would have a significant impact on that property. Just heading back, I'll just show you the photos again of the neighbouring properties and openings. So you can see, sorry, I'll just get to the right one. So this is number 22 on the left-hand side. So again, the application property is here. So you can see they do have openings within the side elevation here. So these are serving kitchen and hallway windows, landing windows, toilets, bathroom windows. So all of these windows and the rooms that they serve are all considered to be non-habitable rooms, and therefore the impact on these windows, again, given the distance and the fact they're non-habitable rooms, it's not considered that the increase in height of this front extension would significantly impact on light or outlet to that property. And similarly for the bungalow, so number 18, you can see they also have some openings within that side elevation. You can see there's a door and a window, so it's believed they serve again a kitchen area, and you've got the door that serves that there as well. But again, given that distance, the fact that there's an existing garage that's currently on the boundary and the proposed extension is set away from the boundary, so it's actually increasing the distance from the development to the bungalow. So the impact on light and outlook from the proposed side extension is actually considered to potentially improve for those windows and openings within that side elevation. The side extension is slightly deeper than the existing garage, but again, given the distance, it's not considered that would have a really harmful impact. In terms of the design, just flicking back to here, so it's providing a double gable frontage design, which is different to other properties in the street. But as you can see from the photos, it's already a building that isn't similar in design to other properties in the street. The ridgeline isn't increasing, so in terms of where it sits within the street, actually I do have the street elevation, sorry, I'll just show you that because that's very useful. Here you go. So in terms of the street elevation, you can see that the ridgeline isn't increasing. It still will remain below the ridgeline of the 2-storey property. In terms of the eaves level, whilst the first floor extension and 2-storey extension are projecting forward, the eaves level of both of these again fall below the 2-storey building. So it still works quite well as a transition building between a 2-storey building and the bungalow. In terms of the materials, they are proposing some render, and there is some evidence of render on other properties in the street, although they are mainly brick. But at ground floor level, all of this will be red brick in keeping with the neighbours. In terms of the actual front projection, the front gables will follow the front building line of the neighbouring properties, so there's no concern regarding how it sits in terms of the street elevation, in terms of projection, because there would be the same depth setback from the road. So it is considered that whilst it is, you know, a different design, it's not significantly out of character of the area, or the fact that the existing design differs to surrounding properties. It's not considered that this would be harmful to the character and appearance of the area, and given the distances to neighbours, the impact on neighbouring amenity is considered to be acceptable, so it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I recommend the officer's recommendation is adopted. The Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members, any comments? Not a hand. Well, therefore, thank you very much. But therefore, I put this to you. Those in favour of this application, please show the hand. Those against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. And carried. Thank you. And myself. Yep. Thank you, members. Moving on, and we'll give permission for people if they want to put their coats on. You can. Quite the opposite to what we're used to. Agenda item 4D, which is 31 Southwood Road, Ramsgate. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Gillins. Mr. Gillins, are you there? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, members. This application is for a side porch on the main house, a rear kitchen extension on the main house, and a double garage at the end of the garden. This was originally approved by planning in March 2018, but due to circumstances, COVID, I had a cancer diagnosis, and so on, it's put me back. We've had to reapply because the original application timed out. The rear extension on the house and the porch, replacement porch, are exactly the same as was approved in March 2018. And just as a point of note, the rear extension does not protrude back even as far as the rear extension on my neighbour at number 33 Southwood Road, and is contained behind a 2.5 metre high perimeter wall which runs all the way around my garden, a brick wall. So there's no impact on neighbours or the general public walking by. The garage is largely the same, but I made 2 important amendments to the plan that was originally passed. The architect that submitted the plan had shown a symmetrical gable roof with a ridge running from north to south, which would have meant that the gable end, the north end gable end, would have cast a shadow over the rear neighbour's garden, which I didn't want. So I've changed that to an asymmetrical gable roof with the ridge running east to west. The north slope will be about 25 degrees and the south slope 35 degrees. What that does is it means that with the access alley a metre wide between me and the rear neighbour and their 2 metre high fence, they won't even see the roof. So there'll be no impact on their natural light, there'll be no impact on their line of sight or a feeling of enclosure. The 35-degree south-facing roof also gives me the option later on of fitting solar panels. The other important amendment I made is that in the original plan, the garage wall on the Napleton Road side was set back from my garden wall. One of the things I wanted to achieve was easier and safer access to and from the garage. So I've redrawn it so that the garage wall is butted up against the garden wall. The purpose of that is that instead of having to park at right angles to the road, I can park almost parallel to the road. Now, the other issue that might arise with the rear neighbour is traffic movements, but one thing I'd like to I don't know what the word is, but the existing vehicular rights are long-standing, and I've given evidence that even before 1971 there was a garage there, and the local plan map even shows the garage standing there. I'm also making improvements to the end wall to bring it back from the road to improve the safety for people exiting the alley, because there's no pavement there. So the issue of traffic movements won't change. I'm using it daily now as it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gillians. Right, I'll ask the planning officer, which is Annabelle this time, I think, to outline this application.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red, number 31 Southwood Road. So Southwood Road running across the middle of the slide, Nappleton Road running north to south, and Bloomsbury, Bloomsbury Road at the top of the slide. So this is the aerial view of the site. So this is number 31 here. It's rear garden up here. This is the western side of the front of number 31. You can see a porch here, and this is the main bulk of the front elevation. This is number 31 on the left-hand side of the slide. Number 29, Southwood Road on the right-hand side, and you're looking down Nappleton Road in the middle here. So this is number 31 on the left-hand side again. So we're looking down on Nappleton Road here towards Bloomsbury Road at this far end. So this is a view from Nappleton Road. This is number 31 here. This is the rear wall, side wall that's been talked about. So it is quite a high brick wall. You can see there is an existing structure to the rear of number 31, but this is where the rear extension will be put in this location here. So we're looking again down Nappleton Road, but this is number 31, the application site here, and this is number 38, Bloomsbury Road. And this is just another view of the end of the garden of number 31 Southwood Road here. The gates are already in existence. This is the alleyway that's been talked about. So we've got a boundary wall here of some 2 metres in height. The alleyway is 1 metre in width, and then there's another 4 metres of garden before you get to the the rear wall of number 38 Bloomsbury Road. So essentially there are 2 parts to this application, the rear extension and the proposed garage. So we'll look at those in turn. So this is the block plan of the site. This is where the rear extension would sit, and the proposed garage, as we say, to the rear of the garden. So this is existing rear elevation, and this is the rear elevation as proposed. So you'd see the extension here, and as has been said, this is a similar extension, well, almost identical to the extension that was proposed and approved as an application in 2017, approved in 2018. So this is the existing east elevation, and that's the proposed elevation, east elevation. So this would face onto Nappleton Road, and you can just see above the roof, the existing wall, part of the top part of the roof of the extension. This is the west elevation as existing, and the west elevation as proposed. You can see here the extension. Looking at the floor plans, so this is the front of the property, and these are the existing floor plans. So ground floor here, first floor here. This is the proposed floor plan, so you can see the extension is here, and it's a kitchen diner extension, and it would measure some 5.2 metres out from the existing rear of the property, and then you have an actual area of decking that is 1.8 metres beyond the rearmost part of that proposed extension. And you can see on the first floor plan that it is single storey and we have a roof, just the roof plan here. So again, as has been mentioned, the previous application in 2017 granted the rear extension, which is the same as what's being proposed now, and also a garage. But as has excuse me, been explained, the garage is slightly different now to what was proposed and approved previously. So this was the previously approved garage, and you can see it was set in further back from Napleton Road than the garage that's now being proposed. So this is what's being proposed now, and as you can see, this is coming further forward than what was previously approved closer to Napleton Road. This was the east elevation that you would see from Napleton Road. It's facing Napleton Road in 2017, and this is the proposed, the garage that we're considering tonight, and the same east elevation. So looking at the south elevation of the proposed garage and the north elevation and the west elevation of that garage. So there have been concerns raised, particularly in relation to highway issues and whether appropriate access and can be achieved from the garage. KCC Highways have considered the proposal and have made a comment on it, even though it is a non-protocol application for them. They are happy with it and raise no objection on the basis that vehicle movements are likely to be limited. There's a roller shutter door proposed that would not open out onto the highway, and also traffic speeds going along Napleton Road, given its width, will be relatively slow, so that it is not considered there will be an impact in terms of highway movements or access or impacts from the operation and use of that garage. It is also, concerns have also been raised that the garage could be used as a commercial workshop or other business use, which might lead to unnecessary noise and disturbance that wouldn't normally be found in a residential area. But given the size of the garage, it's domestic in scale, it is not considered that it is likely, but we have put a condition on that does only allow the garage to be used for incidental purposes in relation to the use of the dwelling and the garden as a whole. So it is not considered there would be an impact from that. So given that, the officer recommendation is for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Annabelle. Once again, I move the officer's recommendation be adopted. Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Well, I've never known that before. So I put this to you, members. Those in favour of this application, please show. Against? Any abstentions? That is unanimous once again. Thank you, and that proves itself. Thank you. Thank you. Right, going on to agenda item A06, which is the Outlook Foxborough Lane, Minster. Speaking in favour of this application is Mr. Vine. Do I see a Mr. Vine there? Once again, Mr. Vine, good evening, and sorry to keep you waiting, but the long agenda tonight, as you gather, you have 3 minutes.
I was approached in 2019 by Finn's land agents, referenced my earlier request some 30 years ago for a small piece of land to grow extra vegetables at my bungalow. They offered me a small site next to my bungalow in exchange for some of my frontage onto Foxborough Lane. An agreement was made and a contract signed and completed. When the agent came to site to set the boundary, I asked whether I needed change of use. He told me, and I quote, "There is no need." Therefore, I continue to erect the boundary fence and proceed to make the ground ready for planting. We have had 3 years of crops and have also planted some 20 plus trees. With regard to the small cabin, this is a slot together unit positioned on a wooden deck and is not fixed to it, so would constitute a portable building. The extension to the top of the fence is to prevent fertiliser pellets hitting us or the chickens when we are in that vicinity, as they come over the wooden fence with great velocity. As you can see, it is a lightweight frame with a green mesh which blends in with the surrounding crops and trees. With regard to the letters of opposition, some of these people knew of my intentions as I had discussed it with them, and in fact one came to my gate with her daughter and requested the contact details of the land agent as they and their neighbour wanted to purchase some, and after 3 years now objects to the sale of the land. As for her comment that the application is abhorrent, I was misled by the land agent and had no intentions of bypassing any regulations for planning requirements. As for house building, I have no intentions of building and the plot is not connected to the highway. In response to the other objections, the land was a grass track for the last 10 years. There are more animals and insects now, including a hedgehog, who comes through the hole left in the fence for that purpose and has made his home under the cabin. There are bird boxes and feeding station and areas constructed for bees, butterflies and beetles to overwinter. There is also a small wildlife pond for frogs and dragonflies. Lastly, the fence is not hidden from view, and to say I covertly erected it hoping no one would see it is beyond belief, as it is in full view of all the properties in Tothill, Hill House and Laundry Road for the last 3 years without comment. In conclusion, thank you for allowing me to offer this deposition for your consideration.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vine. I ask the planning officer now, which is back to Ian, to give his report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The application site is outlined in red. The property that this bit of land is connected to is now the Outlook, which you can see there. Just to show you the aerial image of the property itself. So the area that we're talking about is the one that is on the right-hand side here. So just having a little look from a 3D view, you can see the area in question. So going into that site, so this is in that section of land. You can see the structure at the end, and you can see some low-level structures in the centre as well. This is just a view looking back towards, I suppose, towards the road, but obviously you can't see the road because of the amount of planting at the front of the site, which isn't within this site, this land. This is just showing the single-storey structure, so it's a small structure and is not considered to have any impact on the countryside due to its scale. This is the original boundary wall of the property, so originally this sort of faced onto the field. And then this is the new fence, or newer fence that was erected a few years ago, which faces the field itself. So this is a view looking to the east, so literally the fence is behind the photograph effectively, and then this is looking towards Froxborough Lane. So you can see there's a lot of planting on Froxborough Lane, and then there's a gap where the road is. And then this is obviously from the actual farmland itself. And then this is just turning to the left there, just to show again that amount of planting that you've got there. And this is just, again, showing that fact that the land itself that's been changed to residential garden is not connected to the road. So this is the hedging that's there. So this is a view taken from the west of the site, looking along Foxborough Lane towards the site. So you've got the garage of the Outlook in the centre of the site there, and then this is the other side of that boundary planting. And then this is a view taken from Google Street View, but from November this year, and you can see the fence there in the background. So the main issues on this is it is development in the countryside. However, it's not considered to result in the loss or harm to the character of the countryside or the landscape character area due to its scale. It is also on agricultural land, and therefore there is a policy E16 which looks at loss of best and most versatile. However, given that the loss of the area in question in this instance is so minimal, it's not considered resulting in significant harm to the supply of agricultural land in the district. It doesn't affect the holding itself, and therefore it's not considered to be significantly harmful to warrant refusal against that particular policy. And so on that basis, it is recommended to allow for the change of use to residential garden land. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ian. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted. Will the Vice Chair please second?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members? Three in a row. Right. Those in favour? Anybody against? Abstentions? That is obviously unanimous. Thank you, members. That's myself as well. Thank you. Moving on once again to agenda item still 4, which is D12, number 4, York Street in Broadstairs. Speaking in favour of the application is Mrs. Jodie Blythe. If you're there, yes.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. You have 3 minutes once again.
Thank you, Chairman. I represent the applicant in speaking in support of this application. The site is located within Broadstairs Town Centre and Conservation Area and within the secondary shopping frontage of York Street. The proposal is to retain the existing shop use at ground floor and to make an efficient use of the highly sustainable site to deliver a single unit of residential accommodation in accordance with local and national policy requirements that seek to encourage residential use in town centres. The application before members has been designed in direct response to feedback received from local residents and officers, including heritage advice in respect of an earlier planning application for the development of this site. The design has moved away from the more contemporary approach initially proposed, and the scheme has addressed the concerns raised by the conservation area in consideration of the previous scheme, which related to a confusing and complex roof form and an unacceptable scale of development. An important design aspect is that the first floor element of the proposal is substantially set back from the ground floor in a similar manner to that of the adjoining properties, such that the shop front will continue to provide the main focus of the site within the town centre. The applicant is happy to accept a condition to prevent the use of the first floor area to the front of the site as a terrace as suggested by officers. The flint wall on the west side of the yard shall be retained. Mindful of the relationship of the site to neighbouring properties, the proposed living space is largely confined to the ground floor, with only an ensuite bedroom at first floor level. Windows serving the first floor bedroom are facing forwards into York Street, and there is a single window facing to the rear. The ground floor living space benefits from an internal courtyard providing a source of natural light to the main rooms. This arrangement will provide future residents with a good level of amenities and meet all relevant technical standards. This development has been found to be acceptable in all other respects, and this is reflected in your officer's recommendation to approve planning permission. We feel that the proposal now meets with relevant policy provisions, and we hope that you can lend your support to the proposal. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Blythe. Speaking under Council Procedure 20.1 is Councillor Ruth Bailey. Councillor Bailey.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking against this application on behalf of residents in my ward who cannot be here tonight. This proposed new dwelling would be sited in what is currently a workyard within a wider conservation area. It would be shoehorned between residential and commercial businesses which surround the site, a block of residential apartments on one side, an existing shop to the front, and to the rear and the opposite side, several businesses, the rear of several businesses, including restaurants and a shoe repairing / key cutting business. The Conservation Officer did remove her initial overall objection, but she still cites residual concerns which affect this historic environment, namely that the design and materials are still somewhat contemporary, that the structure, as mentioned, could be used as a roof terrace, and that the flint wall, which is considered to contribute well to the character and appearance of the surrounding conservation area, should be retained. As you heard, the concern regarding the potential for a roof terrace has been conditioned through a fixed window, but the materials and design remain the same. With regard to the flint wall, the flank wall of the new development appears to be built right up to the boundary line, so it would effectively conceal and subsume the length of the wall, leaving only a very small area of flint left exposed to the rear. The concern of the neighbouring apartments is that there will be a reduction in light and a sense of enclosure, because the separating wall will more than double in height, with the second storey of the proposed building being even higher. And this new structure would also alter the historic street scene. On the opposite side, there would be a reduction in natural light to the workshop at the rear of the shoe repair business, who depends on light for his work. Also, with regard to the living conditions of any future inhabitants of this proposed dwelling, the only view I can see of any kind from the ground floor living space would appear to be brick walls, hardly conducive to good health and well-being. Apart from a very small courtyard, there's barely any outdoor amenity space. Also, the window of the cobbler's workshop is adjacent to this proposed courtyard, and the noise from his machinery would be very noticeable, especially in the summer months when the windows are open. There are also flues and extractor fans at the rear of the two restaurants which back onto this property, which could cause odour and noise. And finally, while realising that town centre developments are not required to provide off-street parking, this development is sited on a busy, narrow, one-way road with double yellow lines in the conservation area, and any removals, deliveries, utilities servicing this premises would block the road. In addition, a valuable existing parking space to the front will be lost to storage for bins and a bike shed. For all these reasons, I would ask members to consider this application carefully and even suggest that a site visit might be helpful to appreciate how crammed this development is and to assess the relationship to the surrounding residential and commercial buildings and to the overall street scene. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bailey. The officer now will outline the report, which I believe is Annabelle.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this is the application site outlined in red. We have Serene Court, which is the apartment block on the left-hand side here, and commercial properties with some residential above, turning the corner into Charlotte Street. And sorry, as has been mentioned, the site is in the Broadstairs Town Centre within the conservation area. So this is an aerial view of the site. So the site is this area here. That's the apartment block we've looked at previously. So just looking at some photographs of the site. So this is the application site here, the front view of it facing onto York Street. It's got distinctive sort of green frontage, which might be helpful when you sort of look at some of the other photographs to get your bearings. So looking again, this is the front of the application site, the single-storey element that's on the site now. So it's got the green frontage there and the green to the top of the roof here. This is the block of flats, and this is the adjoining commercial property, also facing York Street with a two-storey element or first floor elements set back from York Street. Again, this is a better view of the adjoining commercial building with its two-storey element there, the flats just poking out here, and some upper floor accommodation here on upper properties as you start to go around into Charlotte Street. So this is the rear of the site. This is the actual single-storey element that's on the site there. You can see the distinctive sort of green part to the roof here. You can see this is the first floor element that's above the commercial property that adjoins the site. This is Serene Court here. And this is an area of Flint Wall that's been talked about. And this is a shoe repair business just in this building here. So again, another view of the back of the site. So you can just see this is the rear of the single-storey element on the site. And this is the first floor above the adjoining commercial property. And we have some other back views of first floor and second floor development above, but not in the site. And again, we're moving further around, so you've got that first floor element here and some other higher development on above properties, properties facing Charlotte Street. So this is the shoe repair business that's been talked about. So it is a commercial building, and there is still a right-of-way, which you'll see later on, that does provide access to this site, but it would be impacted by the proposed development, but it is borne in mind that it is commercial, not residential, and it would be used at certain hours and not occupied 24 hours a day. So just giving another view of the application site. So it's here. You can see the flat building here, and you can see the upper floors here, and you can see the slight setback, but we'll look at that later, from the parapet in the front facing York Road. So this is the existing block plan. So this is the single-storey element that we've looked at, and the rest of the site that we've looked at is open at presently. So this is the proposed block plan. So you can see you've got this light coloured grey area is new development. So this is the existing ground floor, so the single-storey element that we've seen here. And this is a proposed ground floor. So we've still got the existing single-storey bit here, and then we have the single-storey extension running off into the yard that we've just looked at, and this is the internal courtyard that's been referred to. So it would have an element of amenity space within the site. So this is the existing, well, essentially roof plan, because we're only looking at single-storey existing development here. And this is the proposed first floor. So this is the only actual first floor accommodation that's being proposed. So that is the bedroom and the ensuite that's been mentioned. So this is, as you can see, it's set back from the front of York Road, and this is the green roof of the proposed single-storey extension, and this is the internal courtyard. So looking at some elevations now, so this is the front of the existing front elevation facing York Road, and this is a proposed elevation. So you can see the existing building here. This is the first floor element that we saw. So again, this is the side elevation. So you can see it as existing. So this is York Road here. And this is the proposed same elevation. So this is the existing single-storey building that would be retained in commercial use. This is the first floor element here. And the rest is a single-storey extension that comes further along the side. So this is the elevation. You can see the block of flats behind. This is how it is as existing, and this is the proposed with the block of flats behind. So the existing single-storey element, the first floor element that's being proposed, which is set back from York Street, and then we go off and look at, essentially, this is the courtyard bit and the internal area of the ground floor as proposed. And this is the rear, so you can see this is the existing single-storey building that we have on site, and this would be the proposed rear that you would see. So again, you can see the courtyard, the two-storey element, and this is the single-storey element that protrudes further back into the site. We'll just have a look at some perspectives that have been shown. So here we have the existing single-storey element and the block of flats on the left-hand side here. And this is it as proposed. So you can see it retains that strong single-storey element facing York Street. The two-storey element is set back, and then you can just see the single-storey element running off there. Another perspective, again, looking at the existing relationship between the single-storey element that's on site now and the block of flats, and this is as proposed. So you have the block of flats here. You can see the setback of the first floor element here, so there is a gap there, and the relationship between the proposal and the block of flats is considered to be acceptable. This is actually a view of a perspective view anyway of what we might expect to see from if you were looking out one of the windows of the block of flats here on the side. So you'd see the green roof, you'd see the courtyard poking out, and you'd see the two-storey element, but it is not. But you can see the distance between the two developments, and you can also see that it would be set back from York Street, so it's not considered that there is an impact on those flats that would be significantly harmful to recommend refusal on that basis. We have, again, another perspective view here where you can see the single-storey element, the first floor element, and the neighbouring relationship with the first floor element here, which is also set back. So to summarise, members, it is noted that the site is in the urban confines and the commercial use will remain on site, so there is no in principle objection to this proposal. There is considered to be an acceptable relationship between the proposed development and existing buildings, and that does include the shoe repair building that has a right of way to the rear of this property, and that right of way will be retained. There may be some loss of light to the windows that serve that building, but as had been mentioned, it is a commercial building. It is not residential, so they're not habitable rooms, and it's expected that the use of that building would only be at certain times a day and not being used 24 hours a day. So it's not considered the impact on that building would be significantly harmful. There is not considered to be an adverse impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area, and although it is relatively contemporary in nature, and the conservation officer is not now raising any objection to it, but just merely pointing out it is fairly contemporary in nature. Excuse me. The proposed development does meet the required space standards and is considered to provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers. Yes, the amenity space that is provided on site might be relatively small, but it is better than what's found on many town centre sites where often no residential amenity space is provided at all, given the constraints of the site. It is sustainable, a very sustainable location in the town centre, and it is not considered there is a requirement for any off-street parking to be provided. There is, however, a requirement for the SAM contribution, and it is therefore recommended that the application is deferred and delegated for approval, subject to the safeguarding conditions and the submission of an undertaking for the SAM contribution to be provided. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. I move the officer's recommendation is adopted, as you heard. Vice Chair, please second.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman Cook. Members. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair. These perspectives that we're looking between the block of flats, are they actually scaled correctly? Because I know that area and it doesn't look that wide when I go past it. So I'm just wondering whether the actual gaps have just been the poetic license of an architect to make something look wider than it actually is. I think also that I don't like it at all. It's cramming, it's putting something, it's shoehorning a building into a small area, and I don't think it's appropriate. So on that basis, I don't think I'll be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I do partly echo Councillor Moore's statement. It's almost like a case study in cramming into as small a space as possible, with the yard almost. Oh, it's very minimal. You could probably get a chair in there to sit outside. It is very cramming. I was interested to look at the outlook from the block of flats. And yeah, if you're in the third floor flat looking out of there, then it doesn't particularly obscure your view. If, however, you're in one of the ground floor flats, it does. So I think if the outlook had been from the ground floor rather than from the third floor as it was, it would have been slightly different. And I'm a little bit confused about, I heard mention that the flint wall was being kept, but I didn't see quite how that is being kept there. There wasn't any view of it in any of the drawings. And yeah, there is one other comment. He talked about obscuring the light of the business in Charlotte Street, Peter's Shoe Repairs, which I'm familiar with because I have had shoes repaired in there. And the light, his workshop light, will be impaired, so he will have to either switch his lights on a lot more regularly to do his work, or I might have to look for another shoe repairers. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Garner. Before I bring Councillor Crittenden in.
Thanks. Just to come back on a couple of the points that have been raised. So one on the perspective, back to Councillor Moore's point, they are perspectives. We're not considering those, we're considering these floor plans. So indeed, there's going to be an element of interpretation. I think in terms of this floor plan, you can see what you've got on the left-hand side of the green line is the gap between Serene Court and this site. So there is a vehicular access, what is a gate, and then a sort of width of a vehicle, probably about 3 metres, running down the side of Serene Court. So there is a gap there, but again, I think you have to take the perspectives, as always, with a slight pinch of salt, because they are just that. I think they're useful in terms of understanding the different roof forms you've got there and the fact that the element is set back. Just to pick up a couple of points. One, this is a one-bed unit, therefore there's no requirement for any external amenity space under policy GI04. So if it was a two-bed unit, then you'd have to provide some amenity space, but there is no minimum standard to amenity space, but it's a one-bed unit. In terms of the concerns about Serene Court, in terms of the ground floor, there are no ground floor windows as such facing this site. It's the access, it's the actual entrance to the flats, and then it's literally a vehicle route to a driveway. So it's the first lot of accommodation is set up, but it's not quite two-storey. I may, if members would permit me, I'll show you on Street View. I'm probably going to break the system by doing this, but let's just see if it works. So there you go. There's the just the view down the side of Serene Court. So these aren't quite second floor windows, because you can see it slightly seems like a reduced height. But we don't have a major concern in terms of the impact, because you're looking over what is a single storey structure. That's one of the issues with the previous application, which I'm afraid we don't have the plans of to show you, members, because it's not under consideration. But that had a two-storey element that went further back than what we currently have, and that's one of the reasons why it was removed, because of the impact on Serene Court. Can I stop presenting, and then will it show you what was there? It's not going to, so sorry, Annabelle. That's not the proposal, just to make it very clear.
Bruce's Harbour.
In terms of the last thing from me, and then I'll pass to Annabelle to talk about the film wall. In terms of light to a commercial premises, that's not enshrined as something that we can protect under planning policy. If it was living conditions of residential properties, then it is something. Again, I think the issue is, technically, again, it's not necessarily it is a fallback that obviously someone could build a 2-metre high wall in front of that to safeguard their land. Obviously, at the moment, the boundary is clearly the building, and that I appreciate it creates a bit of an interesting aspect sometimes when you've got side windows that are literally facing into a site, which could result, though, in putting a 2-metre high wall, allowing for that access that Annabelle's mentioned, straight in front of those windows at the moment in terms of light. But I'll pass to Annabelle about the Flint aspect.
Yeah, members, this photograph may aid you in looking at the Flint wall. It is this bit of wall, as I understand, that is being talked about. It's the other-
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, that will have some building and not be readily viewable from within the conservation area, but it is not actually that visible from the conservation area, the wider conservation area as it currently stands, because it is to the rear of this site, so it is shielded from the most views of the conservation area by the existing single-storey building and the access road we just looked at. So it is not considered that it's actually would be its loss, given its limited visibility at the present time, would be significantly enough to warrant a recommendation for refusal on this application.
Thank you. Councillor Crinden.
Thank you. One part of my question was about the Flint wall. The other part of what I wanted to say was I'm actually quite a fan of modern architecture. I like what's behind the frontage, but I think the frontage is maintaining the historic element, so it kind of meets both of those. And it is a little bit crammed in, but broadly, I think actually on balance, I like it.
Thank you. Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I must admit, I totally agree with Councillor Crinden. I think it's a very inventive use of space. It's a derelict site at the back of that shop, and I think to use it and make it into a habitable space is absolutely superb. I think that putting a green roof on it is better than seeing a bit of concrete which is tatty with pallets on it. I think it's very imaginative and very good. I must admit, I will support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bayford.
Thank you, Chair. This is a really difficult one for me because I do think it looks odd, and I do think it's probably crammed to some extent, but other applications have gone through that I consider to be crammed too. It is providing a home for somebody, so, and it's taking up a space that's not particularly sightly at the moment. So, very hard, but I think I'm probably now in favour. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. Councillor Orban.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I could go along with Councillor Hart, and I just think if you look in London, for those of us who go to London and the Gherkin and what they're next to, all their historic buildings, modern and old, they all go together. That's all part of a growing conservation area, isn't it? So it's not only to maintain the conservation area, it's to do something with it as well. So I'm happy to support that application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Orban. Councillor Wing.
I think we need to view some of these areas in a motion of moving forward. These are higgledy-piggledy areas we have in some of our coastal areas that have, probably 50 or 100 years ago there was another building appearing that was slightly out of keeping with what was there already. And all we're doing, I think, is repeating what's happened in the past, adding something that's a bit different and a bit new. I do think it's sad that the Flint wall will be lost, i.e. it will be hidden, because I think we need to think about introducing new flint walls that then become part of a new set of heritage moving forward, and they are a significant feature in our area here. So that'd be my only objection, is that the flint wall is hidden and lost, and there wasn't a way of building a new flint wall which would have been a new heritage feature for future generations.
Thank you for that, Councillor Wing. Name's gone.
Okay, I agree with it that it is a good use of space, but I am surprised our colleagues over there with the Green Party haven't noted the use of the green, one of the new ideas that's coming forward from Southern Water, the green roof. Thank you.
How could I forget your name, Councillor Wright? Sorry about that. Thank you. Councillor Garner.
Yeah, thank you. I would just like to say that I'm really pleased that our presence in the room has enabled some of our colleagues to look at these applications in a much more environmentally friendly way, and I hope that continues.
There's no.
Thank you. Righto, members. I can't see any hands raised, so I'm going to put this to you to defer and delegate for approval. Those in favour? Those against? 2 against, abstentions. That has been carried. Thank you, members. And myself. Thank you, members. That concludes public speaking, but before I go into that, I'm going to have to ask Councillor Wing to have a walk round Margate for a few minutes. Put your coat on. I think members are aware one of the applications on here is Councillor Wing. So thank you, Councillor Wing, and a happy Christmas. That concludes public speaking for this meeting. I will now ask the clerk to read out those applications. If a member wishes to reserve any, would they please put their hand up or shout out, whatever you like to do to us. Thank you. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. The applications are A05, 53 Addington Street, Ramsgate. A07, 69 Westfield Road, Margate. A08, 1 to 13 Churchfields, Margate. A09, 5A Royal Crescent, St Augustine's Road, Ramsgate. A10, also 5A Royal Crescent, St Augustine's Road, Ramsgate. A11, Depot, Jackie Baker's Recreational Ground, Highfield Road, Ramsgate.
Thank you, Stephen. I haven't seen any hands raised, so can I have a proposer to move that the applications that have not been reserved be determined in accordance with the officer's recommendations? Seconded. All agree? Thank you, members. That concludes the meeting tonight, and I think before we go, I'd love to offer you all a drink, but there's no pubs open in Margate. On the serious side, a very happy Christmas to you all and officers, and look forward to seeing you in the new year. Have a good one. Thank you. Thank you.